Welcome to Healthy University, where we'll discuss issues and subjects on how you can live a healthier and more productive life. And now, here's your host for Healthy University, Alan Eisenberg.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Healthy You. This is your host, Alan Eisenberg, and I'm really happy today to have both my friend, my Yogini, I think is the right word, the person who helps me relax on Tuesday nights through yoga, and someone who recently posted on Facebook something that really took me by surprise, is that she dealt with being an alcoholic at one point, and I think, as we know, both with myself having to admit it and probably what she'll say is that once you're this, you're always it. You always have to remember that it's in you. And I always have to remember that I have, the mental health things that I have to watch out for. So my guest today is Jaynes, and she's an experienced internationally registered yoga teacher and yogini practicing yoga for over 16 years. She's an entrepreneur running two companies, Always Yoga, a yoga and wellness company, where she teaches classes, coaches in wellness and mindful living, runs workshops, events, and retreats year-round. She's also the owner of Smoothie-Licious, an organic and delicious smoothie bar in Oakton, Virginia. She's also a childhood trauma and near-death experience survivor, and she celebrates her sobriety in recovery for almost 8 years. She's a single mom of two amazing teenagers who make her world a better place every day and credits them for inspiring her recovery. So welcome, Karen.
Wow, that's me, huh?
That's you. It's kind of weird, isn't it? But what was really weird for me, because I've seen you, we've known each other for, I guess, going on 4 years now.
Uh-huh.
And you just recently decided on Facebook to say, okay, I dealt with being an alcoholic and I had to go through that. And it just struck me how there are these pockets of things people don't know about each other. So you can know someone really well and sense that you know them and then have something surprise them. So I admit I was surprised because I see who you are today. I see what you do and how much at peace you live your life, and I think that's what I'm trying to do too. So I thought, if you were willing to come on Healthy You and talk about it, it would be a great conversation to have for people who are going through things that just don't know how to necessarily do the things that you've done or maybe I've done. But again, and disagree with me on this, we're always this. We're always going to be that. So in alcoholism, I know they talk about once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Do you buy that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always in recovery. I think that's the terminology. And I do believe it. And I think that it is a lifelong consciousness. You have to be aware of your place in that lack of ability to maintain control in a situation, and that's what that means for me. I have recognized that I have the inability to maintain control of drinking in my life, and and I did not go through the formal AA program, like the 12-step program. I did. I did go through Alcoholics Anonymous by going to meetings for 6 months when I was living in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that. And, I don't know if maybe I'm jumping ahead of some of your questions or your agenda for tonight. But I mean, for the longest time, I denied that I was, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I was like, oh, that's not me. Like I'm holding down my jobs and I have lots of friends and I have a great I live in a great house and, I was in a relationship at the time. I was still married and you know what I mean? I was just doing what other people do. You work hard and then you play hard. Right.
Right. And I think that's what I've noticed. I'm very lucky, I think, in my life not to be an addict. I've tried all sorts of stuff. I won't get into that. That's the private stuff I don't talk about. But nothing has ever struck me as I need to have this. I've never been in that boat. But certainly in the mental health world, I've been in some other boats. So one of the things I've noticed with the people I know who were alcoholics is it was like a part of their life, but you couldn't tell, like, because it was so much of the way they were and they've been doing it so long, it was a maintaining. At this point, they wouldn't know how to act any different. It's like I've met people who drink a quart of vodka a day, day, and they would never look drunk. They would never appear to be any different until later I would find out. But the one thing I know is that I had to trace back in my family roots. Was there anything that led to my issues? Was there anything in your family history? Was there anything there that indicated alcoholism?
Yeah, my father was an alcoholic. His father was an alcoholic. My brother was an alcoholic. And since then, he's cleaned up. He doesn't smoke or drink anymore. One of my brothers. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a family thing. It's, for sure. This is something that some people get the gene, some people don't, and I never really thought of myself like, I didn't touch the stuff. I was like such a good student when I was in high school. I mean, maybe a couple here and there, like, when you go out with friends and you get in sort of a trouble and stuff like that. But the problem happened after I got married, and I just was, I was just in a party situation a lot. I married a musician, and he didn't do that full time, but he did it in his off time. And so, we spent a lot of time, with bands, and he was playing music, or he had friends that were in bands. And so it was like a big party scene in my 20s. I mean, for sure. I mean, and I was in the music business right before I met him. So I don't want to throw it all on there, but I was in the music business for a while. And that was, shutting down this bar and then opening up another one, over, I mean, it just became a real, weekend warrior or, scene. And Alan, I don't know if your listeners know, but I'm 5'1". I'm like all of 100 I'm all of 100 and so many pounds wet, so like I'm a little person. And, I know if you drink a lot, certainly your system gets used to it, but it was very unpredictable. Sometimes I could drink and hang, and sometimes I could drink and just lose it. I didn't do well with it. Sometimes I could just have one and I was totally great. Other times it tasted so good, I couldn't stop till I fell down. So, that's kind of the story. And people who knew me back then, I think they knew me as that, we definitely were partying, we're definitely having a good time. But the people who mostly were around me were doing the same thing. So nobody was like, wow, she's got a real problem. Do you know what I mean? Because everybody had the problem. We're all doing the same thing. And, but it was like, how many times was I going to do that to myself, and then you end up in situations, that you can't control. And, some of that was earlier too, in my, in my in my college life. I'll tell you, college life, I did end up in a very sticky situation. I was date raped in college, and it was an alcohol situation. Like, it was being out with a group of people, not on my college campus or anything, but at a job where I worked when I was in college, going out with a group at a bar, drinking way too much, and ending up in a situation that was not good. And so, that was an indicator. And then, the whole parties, and, through my 20s and my 30s, I mean, not too much to my 30s, but it just kept going. I mean, it kept going. And it still did in my 30s. And I'm trying to think of what year I ended up doing AA for 6 months. I think it was like 2000. I think it was like 1999, 2000.
Yeah. So, it's interesting because you bring up two things, and I do think that they're connected, because I felt this way about me too. I mean, I was a binge drinker, no doubt, in college, being in a fraternity, but there is a lot of societal pressure depending on what you're doing at the time, to be involved with drinking or possibly drug use. And of course, in your story about being date raped, that's, such a common thing, unfortunately, especially on the college campuses. And then we know that the women aren't coming forward because they're saying, well, I drank so much, and they know that's going to come up in court, and all. That's just going to lead them to drink more, to get past this mental block that they're going to end up having. And then there's the other thing, which, I think is that some of us are just predisposed to things. I'd almost tell you're addicted to yoga in some ways too, right? You have an addictive personality, right? So there's your personality, and there's sort of your what's ingrained in you, and then there's the societal part. And do you feel like that had a lot to do with it? Because I know in the music industry, boy, drugs. Yeah, they love to make movies on HBO about it, of course, but drugs, drinking, partying, that's the whole thing. I mean, what's the fun of reading about bands like Led Zeppelin and Aerosmith is all the partying and hotel bashing they did, right?
I met Steven Tyler, by the way.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. That was probably one of my highlights. But there is like this whole sort of, I think there is pressure. I mean, Alan, come on, every time you go out to dinner, right? The first thing they ask you is, what can we get you to drink?
Right.
And, right in, you're right in there. And, we know that, of course it brings the bill up. I used to waitress, we know it brings the bill up. But, when you tell somebody you want a soda or you want water, now it's what I do. I'm like, oh, I'll just take 2 waters, or whatever. They're just like, what? But, there is that pressure. I think in when you said about, the date rape situations, I mean, what comes to me is you then just, there's this loathing. You sort of get this, this self-loathing, like, man, what have I done to myself? Do you know what I mean? Like, you put it on yourself, and I think a lot of women do this, and there is a certain responsibility, but there is also there's a responsibility on all parts, for not to be taken advantage of, and that there is a real mess with that, the whole the recovery from that, what you've put yourself into, and I put myself. I mean, honestly, through drinking, there were relationships outside of my marriage that were very abusive. Not my marriage was not. Dave was a good guy. Just Dave drinks a lot, but I have been in relationships where I was with very either verbally abusive people. I mean, I grew up in a real mess anyway, but and to a point, like there was a relationship that I was in after my marriage that was horrible. That was very drinking. That was drinking induced violence, and and he was on painkillers too.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, that doesn't mix. So that was really a wake up call for me. Like, that was a big wake up call for me, and I think people just have to get to some bottom, and I think that sort of was that for me. There was a time where there was so much drinking and out of control that I ended up with a broken face on the side of my head, like on the side of my eye, and a broken tooth. And at that point, people wanted to take me to the hospital, and I said I can't because I didn't have health insurance. And so they just had to patch me up. Do you know what I mean? Like at that point you're like, what have I done to myself? Like, what am I doing? And so, yeah, that was probably my bottom, at that point, just
Yeah.
ending up in the situations that just were destroying me. And like my gut, oh dude, my gut was a mess. I felt like I was probably getting close to an ulcer, because it would burn when I drink.
Sure. Sure.
And I wasn't a wine drinker. I was like, I'd start with a beer, but then would go to like Captain Morgan's and, rum and, heck, I had done martinis and tequila. I mean, oh my God, it was hard stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Crazy.
I can't even smell bourbon anymore from what happened to me in college. So
Yeah.
I can't even, Scotch
But
bourbon, I can't even smell it. But the one thing about what you're saying is, when do you realize you have a problem? I think for many of us, it's that hitting that bottom. And what does the bottom look like? It's despair. It's, you call it what you want. It can be depression. It can be just loss of belief that there's anywhere to go. And that's a scary place, but it's also a place that I like to say is a place to come out of. You can't go any further down. So where are you going to go? And the sad thing is, of course, some people make a bad choice, an ultimate choice of taking their life. But those of us who don't work their way up. And I know it's crazy, but we already have come to a break. So we have to take a break. And then I do want to hear that. I do want to hear how you came out of it, how you became the person you are today, which is someone that inspires me, someone that inspires, I think, a lot of people. People don't see it, obviously, with a podcast, but when I go to a yoga class with Karen, there's no space. It's like it fills up because everybody wants to be there to watch her do her magic, which is make you feel like life is going to be great. And so when we come back, I want to hear how you got there, because it's an amazing thing. And so if you'll stay with me in a minute, we'll be right back with more Healthy You.
You're listening to Healthy University with Alan Eisenberg.
Hi, and welcome back to Healthy You. This is your host, Alan Eisenberg, and I'm here with Karen Jaynes, and we're talking about her dealing with her alcoholism, and we're just about to talk about how she came through her recovery, how she got to the point she's at now, which is a very mindful person, a person who's very focused, and maybe there's things I still don't know about Karen, so let's find out a little bit. So for you hit your bottom, then what, Karen? Then what was your next move?
It was cleanup. You know what I mean? It was, and for me, I just knew I was done. I mean, I was really done. Like I had gotten to a point in my personal relationship at the time where it was just ridiculous, and I was just like, this is done. So it really happened because of that, and then I made huge changes in my life. I mean, that relationship left. And I said, I will never date another person who drinks. And not that somebody who had a problem drinking.
Right.
I made a pronouncement that I could not be in a relationship with somebody who drank, because I don't feel strong enough. Do you know what I mean? Like when you're with an intimate, for me, to be with an intimate partner and to have somebody sharing your life, I just don't want to kiss the beer. I don't want to be around it. I don't want it sitting on in my house. I'm really done with it. I just did not want to even bring myself close to it. So I think, for me, I had to literally, seriously, physically move myself out of the environment. And I remembered, a lot of the AA work, and I'm a huge self-studier. So I just went to, yoga saved me, I was already in yoga. I did my 12 steps in yoga because the principles of yoga, there's, all the values and principles that they have, the yamas and niyamas, that really are very much like the 12 steps of recovery in AA. I did get a recovery book, and I read through it. I didn't read it. I read it, started reading like cover to cover. And I just knew that I have been doing that work as a yogini. And so I felt like that was a huge part of my recovery. I mean, I recovered so much of that on the mat and just constantly studying. I had to reaffirm my belief in myself, I listen to a lot of people who do what I do. They raise you up. Wayne Dyer is one of my favorite. I know he's no longer physically with us, but that man is in my soul. And I read The Power of Intention, and it kind of helped me sort of realign myself into my true nature. And I realized that the addiction and the addictive behavior was behavior that I was using to mask my own fears and insecurities and feelings of self-lack. So I realized the reason why I drank was because I felt very socially awkward. And I know that sounds odd because I know, because like I'm in front of people all the time, but I feel like I'm actually not as extroverted as I seem. I think that we talked about this a long time ago, but yeah, like I really am not as extroverted. And when I ended up in these party scenes, and I think another part is I'm not a very good small talker. I like to get deep with one-on-one with people. But when it comes to like a gathering, I struggle to find a way to connect because I really like to connect more deeply than a lot of social situations in our social networking. What are you hanging out with at bars or at house parties or whatever you're doing? I struggle to really connect deeply with people. And so I think the drinking used to numb my very active brain.
Well, what's really interesting? I mean, you just hit on so many things, and I'll start on the first one that came to my mind because I recently wrote an article on it because I discovered it. There's actually something called being an extroverted introvert. So we put these labels on us. I was putting this label on me, and everyone says, "Oh, you're so extroverted," but it's exhausting. It exhausts me. Like I'm literally exhausted, and I just want to be alone. So like my wife went away this weekend. I was like, I had a weekend alone. I actually went to the movies by myself and had a great time. I was like,
nice. Yeah.
It's like because the other thing you learn is you got to love yourself. Getting back to where you were talking about, one of the things that we have to do is stop hanging around people that are bad for us.
I'm telling you, pull yourself out.
So if we don't like ourselves, that's the first person we got to fix because you don't have any choice but to be around yourself.
Right.
But you do have to stop being in with people that put you in situations that make you feel bad. And I think that any problem you have, I would guess, whether it be drugs, whether it be alcohol, whether it be mental health issues, all these, if you're constantly around people that make you feel bad, that's just going to feed all of those things, whether, it's alcohol that we're talking about today, anxiety, depression, sadness, unhappiness. You have to find the right people to be with and the right part of your life. And a lot of it is actually taking that 180-degree turn, willing to say, this is where I was and I don't want to be here anymore. And the opposite of that is what I want. And that's so difficult.
Yeah.
So difficult.
It is. You have no idea how many people that are walking down the street. Alan, I have taught thousands of students, and you would you'd be amazed at any given time how many people have come up to me and said, who have known, and since I've kind of pulled my recovery out, who have come to me and said, hey, I really have a problem, but I don't know how to fix it. And then I talk a little bit about it, and what happens is their whole social life is wrapped around this, whether it's drinking, it's drinking. I mean, I don't know too many hardcore drug users at this point. I know people who were, but I didn't really dance in that at all. And people, if I was around it, they respected I didn't do that. So I didn't really see too much of the hardcore drugs and stuff. But especially the drinking, people will come up and they'll say, I really think I'm struggling with this issue. I seem to not be able to control myself, but I'm not willing to give up my social network.
Right.
And so I say, well, that's okay if you think you can do it that way. But Alan, in my experience, people don't make it. They do not make it, at least in the first year. Like when you're trying to pull yourself out of that, if you're not able to do it now, what makes you think that you're going to be able to do it all of a sudden? You decided to do it and you're still hanging out with people who are drinking all the time, because it's they're not going to, they may not understand what you're doing, and they may not, I've had a lot of people say, hey, just one, just have one. I'm like, you don't get it. You don't get it. You don't just have one. And, or maybe some people, they don't get it because they can have one.
Right.
But,
and that's the thing is, as I said, I mean, I've never been addicted in my mind. Just, there's never been anything that, I'm a social drinker. Otherwise, when I come home at night, I don't need alcohol. Now, I do know people that come home and that's their stress reliever, right? They go right to a wine bottle or a beer, and that's what they use.
But that doesn't make them an alcoholic.
No, you're right.
Yeah, I mean, but I can't judge that. Only they could judge that. And then the other thing that happens is when you quit drinking, then you're not necessarily ready. You don't want to let go of the friends. Like, you're not saying, hey, you're not judging what they're doing. You're protecting yourself.
Right,
okay.
Right.
And that's important for people to understand, especially if they have friends in recovery and the friends don't really come around anymore. Your friends aren't judging you. Your friends are too busy working on themselves. So, and they're just trying to remove themselves from an environment that, and they're not saying that you're doing something bad. They're just saying that I'm not strong enough for that. I mean, there may be people who become judgy and stuff like that, but that's not my deal. My deal is, well, and then there's a certain playing field. Like, when you're hanging out with people and they're drinking, you get, they go a little bit on a different playing field than you do when you're sober, right? So there becomes like a little bit of a separation, like they're here, you're over there, and they're over there. So conversation becomes a little bit more difficult, and especially if people start getting loopy and stuff. So, I mean, there is just there does, become a shift in your friends. I still have friends who drink, and I do go and hang with them, although I don't sit out all night with them while they're drinking. And when they're, 3 sheets to the wind, I usually leave early. But I was really glad to be with them. And I don't go and look at them and say to each one, even when they get all kind of goofy and wasted, I don't go, wow, I think you have a problem. It's not me to judge. I don't think that just because someone gets drunk that they have a drinking problem again.
Right.
Yeah. So, but, for me, a lot of that was a place of, I think it really came from a place where I didn't really love myself. I think a lot of things happened, and growing up, a lot of trauma happened growing up that made me feel that I was, there was something wrong with me. And, which was so bizarre. But I think that gets deep really young. And if that's embedded inside of you, that gets into like decisions that you make, and that becomes a real issue. And I think a lot of addictions, whether it's alcohol or drugs or shopping, like spending money, gambling, sex. I mean, I think there's a lot of addictions that are totally steeped in this very definite self-loathing where
Yeah.
they feel unworthy and they feel like they're not valued and
Yep.
yeah
Or
and
that they have to do things to make other people happy. I mean, I know for me that was a biggie. I think you're saying things, and I'm sitting listening, and I'm just flabbergasted. I don't know how to say it. Knowing you so long and realizing that I think our stories are so similar, just in different ways.
yeah
But they're very similar from that self-loathing and doing things that you wouldn't normally do in your mind now. Like you go, okay, now that I have the self-esteem back, wow, I can't believe I did these things.
well
I remember when my kids were like 12, and I was thinking about me when I was 12 and the things I did, and they weren't good. I got all my bad stuff out really early,
yeah
but it was like I thought, gosh, I can't believe that was it. But it was lots of self-loathing, lots of wanting to be accepted, and the fear of not being accepted. And I think in alcohol, I know that plays a role. So like even today, like if I go, sometimes we go to these big events and everybody's drinking, and of course the alcohol is free. So all of a sudden everybody's drinking, and I have a technique that I've just picked up on, which is if I'm driving, it's 2 drinks, no matter how long the evening's going to be. It's 2 drinks and I'm done. And then I get sparkling water and cranberry. So it looks a little like a vodka cranberry, right?
dude,
And
I totally
that's my drink.
you know what I do? I do the Pellegrino with a lime. Then it's like a little bit of like a gin and a gin and tonic.
Right. But I look like it looks just like any other drink,
Yeah.
but I'm not drinking.
Yeah.
And it's funny that to this day I do that in order to cover for everybody else, because I don't want them to feel bad, right? I don't want them to think I'm judging them, because we're not. I'm not.
No,
We're not judging people. We're living the lives on our terms.
Yeah, and that's a big deal.
That's the important part, right?
Yeah, I think that's a big deal for me. These are my terms. This is my co-created life. I took control, and taking control, and then like from the bottom, you just have to rebuild your life. And I just didn't want to end up that way. And I think I've always been really motivated myself. I put myself through school, like through college, and I'm just a fighter, I'm a survivor, I'm like, I'm gritty, I'm this little gritty city chick. And so, I just keep going, and I get great satisfaction in achieving, for myself, a better place. I mean, I remember I went to see a Wayne Dyer talk. Like, one of my friends had tickets. She said, "Oh, I got tickets. Let's go see Wayne Dyer." And we went to see him talk. And I was a yoga teacher then, and I had not yet quit drinking. And I sat in the audience, and he said that he would talk about his recovery. And he said that he had quit drinking. And the reason he quit drinking was because he said, I coach a lot of people. And he said, and I just think it's probably better for me to have a clear mind. And I thought, it couldn't have been said better. So when people say to me that, say something about my recovery, I say, I coach a lot of people, and I really need to have a clear mind for it. And I find I just feel like I manifest things much more clear, more quickly. I have, my brain has, become as quick as it used to be. I'm giving up drinking has changed my whole life. I mean, it has empowered me to run 2 companies. It had I live in such a heart-centered place. I'm very much more accepting. I get stressed out, but when I get stressed out, like, I turn to meditation, I turn to my mat, or I just, I do go, oh my God, this is insane, but I don't go back. Now I I had drank once in my recovery. About 5 years ago, I went to Italy. And while I was in Italy, I thought, well, gosh, I'm sitting at this table having this amazing Italian dinner. And I thought, well, I'm going to have a glass of wine. And I never really drank wine because that has a lot of sulfites in it. It kind of made me sick. So I had a glass of wine. And Alan, that was the best wine I ever had. You know what I mean? So like, I had a glass of wine. I'm like, oh my God, it's so tasty. I want to have another. I had 3 glasses of wine that night. And then I was like, yeah, this just shows me that I was right. You know, it just shows me. And so like I've studied, I have some friends that are in recovery, and we talk a lot about it. I have not told the story at a meeting. Like I said, I didn't earn the chips, but I'm reading this book right now called One Breath at a Time, and it's Buddhism and the 12 steps. And they go through the 12 steps, and they bring the Buddhist context into it, because AA is very Christian oriented. And or in some way sort of Christian.
Well, it's like God oriented.
It's God oriented. Yeah, it's Western. Yeah, there's Jewish people in recovery too, but it is very, and it's usually held in a church. Well, I think synagogues hold them too, right?
Yeah,
so
sure.
But yeah, and so I kind of study traditions of the world. And so when I came across this book, a friend of mine gave me this book, One Breath at a Time. I have already been back from the Buddhist part of India, and I thought, oh, what an amazing book. So I'm reading that, and that's like profound healing all over again. So I started getting back into my own healing, just noticing the misalignments, even in my recovery, where the karma of things that I have done have connected with my present life. Yeah. You know, and I noticed my behavior and my choices and all the things that manifest, and what seems to show up in my life is so karmically connected with the things I still need to resolve in my recovery. And so I do a lot of I am very motivated, do a lot of work. I have friends that I talk to. I've gone through psychological therapy when I went through my divorce, and I did that in college when I was struggling with an abuse issue. And so like I went through a lot of different, so I've been through therapists and I've done that work, and that is a lot of work. And now what I use as a tool is I mind map. Do you know what that is?
Yeah. Where you kind of spread out. You start from the center and spread out to all sorts of directions.
Yeah, it's very stream of conscious. I'm not a linear thinker. I am a broad scope, artistic sort of mind, and so I mind map. So I put something in the center. I throw it out there. I find like, what is going on with me here? What's this story about? And I just write that whole story, and I find that incredibly healing, and allows me to really look at the causal effects of what is in the center as an issue. And so that I see it as conceptual instead of seeing it as a flow chart. Well, this had to come first. It's not timeliney.
Right.
Because I think at this point, these things kind of add us in sort of every direction.
Right. Yeah. One of the things I'm not going to give away my next book, but it's going to be about how we do that, how we, what do we call our lives? We call our lives a lifeline, right? We have a lifeline. And so we think of a line as straight, but our lives aren't straight. They go all over the place. And what's straight is what we call contentment. So when you're at the middle of good and bad, that's called being content. And that's when a story ends and a new story begins. But anyway, that's fodder for another day. But we're almost out of time. So I like to ask one last question of my guests for the show, and I'm sure you'll have a great answer to this. But what is the one habit you have today that makes your life better that you didn't practice before, that you didn't do before?
Well, I think, if we're talking about my recovery, what what practice that I do is, I mean, people are going to say, oh, of course she's going to say yoga or she's going to say meditation, but mine is mine's deeper than like mine's part of that. I think I got to this from my yoga and from my meditation, and that is, I choose authenticity. I have to be authentic.
Mm-hmm.
Like I cannot do it any other way, or everything falls apart. So I ask myself a thing called a sankalpa. I choose a word, and for years it was truth. And so I ask myself, like I find a word that speaks to how I'm living my life. And so forever, and probably till maybe the past year or two, my word was truth. Is this true for me? I would ask it with everything that I've done. Like, is it in my business? I would ask it in my personal life, when I would meet people, when I would do something or offer to do something, or something came into my presence or into my field. I would say, is this true for me? And that would allow me to be so authentic and be so honest. And so that's what I do. Like that's what I do. And then I use the tools of yoga and meditation and teaching. My teaching keeps me so straight. If you want to learn about something, then read a book, right? I read a lot of books. I learn a lot of languages. But if you want to master something, then you need to get your butt in front of a group of people and teach it.
Yep.
Because you embody it, and then you embody it and it becomes you, and it's who you are, and it just flows from you. And my teaching has saved everything. So between the teaching and making it my job, and being out in front and presenting it and being it, and living in that truth, like deciding that I'm going to live in that truth.
That's so awesome. And I'll share just a quick story that the biggest mentor I ever had in my life that really got me out of the worst, possible situation I could have gotten myself in during high school was my drama teacher. And she had a magic word, she had a word, and it was moment. Mm-hmm. And I took that on myself. So I only worry about the moment now. I can't worry about what's going to happen in a minute. I can't worry about what just happened. I can only live in that moment. And I don't know if that's what she meant. I don't know if that was her intent, but I think it was. And she was a very, very wise person, and she knew how to talk to teenagers going through some very difficult times. Mm-hmm. And that was her word, moment. And she would tell you it. That's my word. And now I think about what you just said, and I'm like, wow, that's very powerful to have a word.
Yeah.
It keeps you grounded. So thanks for being on the show. So appreciate it. How can people find out more about what you're doing? Learn more about you, and just connect, because you're a very powerful soul. You really are. You offer. First of all, thank you for being honest, for sharing what you shared, because it's not easy. It's not easy for any of us, but we do it because I do it because I want other people to know they're not alone. I want other people to know that you can get through it and come out the other side and be better for it.
Yeah, to have gone through so much in your life, I can only hope and pray that the reason I went through these things is because I'm here to help other people with those things.
Right. And that's it, right? That's what you do. That's what I do. That's what this whole show is trying to do, right? Mm-hmm. That's why we're here, because we have this wonderful, there's so much bad press about the internet and all of this, but communication today, we have the ability to open up lines of communication that were so closed in the past. Mm-hmm. And that I think, as someone who studied it, as someone who never thought they'd see a day when they were doing something like this, mm-hmm. I can honestly say that I hope people find these things, this webcast, this podcast, and get to hear it, because you're very powerful and you were very honest, and you did speak truth.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's an amazing thing. So how can people learn more about you?
So, my yoga company is Always Yoga. So ALLWAYS Yoga. So I have a website, www.alwaysyoga. But they can follow me on Instagram too, which is a lot of fun. And I do post a lot of my recovery, and I really shout out my sobriety on Instagram. And my Instagram name is KJ Yogini. KJYOGINI. And so you can find me there. And I really do spend a lot of time dancing in my sobriety on that method. And I do every so often on my Facebook too. I kind of share them. I'm located in Northern Virginia. I can be reached through my my yoga, and then or come to the hey, I'm at the smoothie bar now. Forget that other bar. I have a smoothie bar at Oakmar Rec Center, which is in Oakton, Virginia, and that's awesome. And you would not believe the conversations that happen at the cart. And that sounds like my next venture, conversations at the cart. So
there you go.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. So absolutely, come by. Let me make you a delicious organic whole food smoothie and give you a hug and share stories. So.
Well, I still need to make my way over there, so I know I owe you that. We'll have more conversation. Well, thank you for being on the show, Karen, and thank you for sharing what was, I know, a difficult conversation. And I know it's recent, it's something you've just opened up about. So it's much appreciated. And thanks for being on Healthy You and sharing it here.
My pleasure.
This is Alan Eisenberg with Healthy You. I hope you'll join us next time. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Healthy University, brought to you by Bullying Recovery, LLC. This podcast does not replace the need for medical advice, professional diagnosis, opinion, treatment, or services to you or any other individual. The information provided here or through linkages to other sites is not a substitute for medical or professional care, and you should not use the information in place of a visit, call, consultation, or the advice of your physician or other healthcare provider. Join us next time for more Healthy University.